And welcome back to episode number 26 of Raise the Banner podcast. This time it's just me for the Raise the Banner team, but I am joined by the Foxborough Fellas host, Pete Collins here. Pete, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Good. Yeah, so we got a pretty strong topic. Topics to discuss. It's not a ton going on in Boston sports. The Celtics and Bruins are just kind of in the heart of their season. But we're primarily going to do Patriots tonight, and then if we have some time, dabble in a little bit of Red Sox talk. But to start, the Patriots coaching staff, as you've obviously seen, their staff has been completed. What are your thoughts on kind of the staff as a whole? I know we were kind of waiting on the tight end and Patriots one, tight end and wide receiver positions. What are your thoughts on the whole, coaching staff as in general? And obviously it's a little bit bigger than the Belichick staffs of the previous years. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it needs to be bigger, right? The coaching staff, you need more support and more help for a rookie head coach, especially one that lacks experience. If you were to knock Mayo, it would be his experience. Um, I was listening to Felger and Maz, and they were having a good time giving him crap because the Patriots keep touting his like past however many years he spent at like Optum as like experience. Like, get that out of here. That has nothing to do with football, please leave me alone with that. But he does need more football help, and he definitely got the football help, and he needed the football help on the offensive side of things, and that's where they went heavy. Um, I like all of their hirings, but really, you ask me again once we start seeing what they do with the players that they have. I think there's so much to be said for free agency and the draft as it relates to the coaches. Like, if the coaches have to go in there with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, they don't have a shot. They just don't, in my opinion. But if the coaching staff goes in there with formidable players, maybe they have a chance. When it comes to the scheme and like what their track records say, it seems like they got some quarterback help. They brought in three guys that all will specifically help the quarterback position, and we all know the quarterback position is really where the Patriots lack right now. I mean, they have two people that have played for them in the past, but nobody wants to see them again. So they brought in McAdoo, Van Pelt, McCartney. All those guys should help with the quarterback position. Um, McAdoo I think he wanted the Giants to go get Mahomes. He had Allen and Jackson ranked high in the 2018 draft class. So I'm hoping his role with the Patriots is really helping them identify the next guy. And I know that's down on our agenda, what we're doing in the offseason, but you need to identify the next guy because I don't think Jones nor Zappi are the guy.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to speculate until, a decision is actually made, whether it's trading Mac or trading Zappy or, if they went free agency with a veteran QB, whatever it is. Until things actually, the moves are actually made, there'll be speculation of, oh, is Mac going to be around, and how, and who's making that decision. There was a lot of displeasure, not displeasure, but kind of rumblings when they hired Ben McAdoo, and then he's a failed head coach, blah 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 blah. Look, I'm not going to buy too much into the reports of his history of evals on quarterbacks, but I got a good Giants friend of mine that basically I remember him talking about it when McAdoo was the coach of how he supposedly McAdoo was banging on the walls to trade up for Patrick Mahomes, and obviously the Giants did not, and Patriots fans are now dealing with the hell that is the Kansas City Chiefs because of it. He allegedly had Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson very high on his board. Was it the following year, or the previous year? I think it was the following year after Mahomes. So the coaching staff as a whole, I think, is solid. The defensive side of the ball, I'm not worried about it really at all.
Nope.
I'm a big fan of Covington. Offensively, Alex Van Pelt, we'll see. It seems like he is at bare minimum a good QB coach type of guy. We'll see how he is as a play caller. That's why I think a guy like McAdoo can help him as well. Um, Tight end coach Bob Bicknell, you know, he's a veteran guy. It should work fine. Taylor Hughes, who was with us for a few years, went to Washington last year. He's come back now. He is, again, like we'll see. I think most fans are relatively happy that Troy Brown's not here, or at
Yes.
least in the wide receiver role. Um, I've been I've been on the train of I think the blame game towards him is a little bit overblown. But either way, I think fans are, I guess, happy that he's not in the mix. But as a whole, I mean, I think they did. I mean, would you say you think they did a solid job overall picking the staff in its entirety?
Yeah, I think they did a solid job. They went with people with experience, people that they could, that they could rationalize hiring. Some of the hires though, like and bringing back like Dante Hightower and stuff like that. You're like, are you just bringing back your buddies? I think Mayo hired his younger brother as like the strengthening team's
He,
coach.
he was the
Like,
assistant beforehand, so I'll give him
yeah,
the. I saw that, and
yeah.
everyone was like, "Oh, this is the nepotism all over again of Belichick." And I'll at least give him that Mayo's brother Duran, I believe that's his name, was the assistant strength guy
Yeah,
beforehand.
he's taking over for the guy that's no longer gonna. He's basically getting promoted, and that's
Yeah,
the only way that I could rationalize it too. I really like Scott Peters. I don't know the guy fought in the MMA. I don't know if you know that and was like successful fighting
yeah,
in
I
the
saw the
MMA.
jujitsu guy or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, not for nothing. That's a lot of hand battling, right? Offensive line, lots of hand battling. I don't know. I think they made some pointed decisions with their hires, and I like their hires, but it really comes down to the players on the roster. They can't. It's the whole Parcells thing, right? Like I can't cook if you don't give me the groceries, right? Like let's see who they give them. If they give them
Yeah,
like the tight ends coach, you said it's a veteran guy, but they have one guy signed as a tight end who Petaway, who we just hope to not that he isn't the guy, right? So like, who's he working with? If he has to work with Petaway as his tight end one, he's screwed. But if he gets Hunter Henry back and maybe a Pharaoh Brown back, okay, now he has a shot again, right? So let's see what these coaches are cooking with.
yeah, and I mean that's what we'll transition to a little bit. The Patriots, free agents. We can break down and go through each one. I would more say let's focus on just kind of who are you hoping among the Patriots free agents that you most want back? I know obviously we're not, no one's going to be mentioning some of these O line guys that are low level. Alex Austin's a ERFA, so he can't go anywhere except for New England.
Exclusive.
Um, but obviously there's Duggar, there's Jennings, there's Miles Bryant. Um, Jalen Mills is a free agent. Josh Uche, Mac Wilson. We got. I'm not even going to name the special teams guys because I don't want to get people riled up. But
You'll get
Michael
me riled up.
Onwenu, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, Ezekiel Elliott, Trent Brown, Kendrick Bourne, and Pharaoh Brown. Where are you kind of in a whole of this free agent approach? I know there was a little bit of talk today. It seems like some early reports are that they might tag Duggar and let Onwenu walk. What's your whole thought on how they need to prioritize and approach their own free agents?
I was shaking my head when you were saying franchise Duggar and let Onwenu walk. Opposite, if anything, right? Like you gotta have an O line, and our O line just has so many holes in it right now. Our center's gonna retire next year, and Andrews. The other Andrews isn't good. Mafi questionable. Sal was good, and Onwenu was good. So I feel like you really want to keep that right side together. So I would prioritize Onwenu as my top free agent for the Patriots, whether that means franchising them or just throwing the bag at them. Either way, we need to retain offensive line. There are some other offensive linemen that are free agents out there that you could go and it comes down to price and evaluation. So, but you have to get, if you're not signing on Wenu, you need to have very good plans about the other free agents that are out there and what you can do. There's I think we're in the 2 weeks right now where you can franchise tag people. So we'll see who's available once this 2 week period's over and what we need after this 2 week period's over. But I don't want Duggar to be signed. I think the franchise is like 16 million for a safety. No, that's just too much for Duggar in my opinion. But I want Duggar back. This isn't a knock on Duggar. I think if you utilize him and play him in the correct positions, he's a very good player. You can't have him manned up on people all alone on an island. That's just not his game. He's more of a run support hybrid. So I agree with re-signing him. He's a solid player. I have him as my third most important after Nwenu. My second most important is Bourne. The wide receiver, he wants to play here. So anybody who wants to play on this team right now, bring him in. We need motivated, good, high character people in a rebuild, because if you got people speaking out, and we'll get to the Red Sox later, but if you have people speaking out against their own team, it's just not a good vibe. And so the Patriots have someone speaking out, taking pictures, posting on social media saying, I hope I can be back. So let's bring Bourne back. We have a wide receiver issue. He was on pace for 80 catches, 800 yards, and 8 touchdowns last year. That's excellent. You pair him up with Pop Douglas. Maybe Parker or Juju rejuvenates themselves. There's your 3 wideouts to pair with a tight end. So I want Onwenu as the first, Bourne as the second, Duggar as the third. And then we need to evaluate the tight end position. You need to have a tight end, and I think you need to re-sign Hunter Henry. If you don't do that, you need to re-sign Gesicki. Hunter Henry would be my. He's the tight end one on the team. He's the better of the 2 tight ends. I want him. I also like Pharaoh Brown too. Don't get me wrong. I just like him as a tight end 2, tight end 3, not as your tight end 1. So I would go after Hunter Henry. Again, the offense is the problem. So with the tackle, wide receiver, and tight end being 3 of my picks so far, you need to address the offense. I had Alex Austin as a person I want, but as you mentioned, he's exclusive, so we really don't need to put him on this list. I have Uche being the 5th
he
person.
either plays for the Patriots next year or he doesn't play at all. That's basically the rule of his free agency.
He's exclusive, right? Highly
Yeah.
exclusive. Meaning, yeah, he's here. He's on our team, but he's a player that I would like to see come back and get, like you said, almost guaranteed will, unless he wants to sit out, which would be foolish. Uche is my 5th person that I want back. I think, if you go back 2 years, he was. People were talking about him as like, what's the price tag going to be on him? Are we going to have to back the Brinks truck up for Uche? He had a little bit of an off year when it comes to sacks, but I still think had a highly productive year when it comes to the overall defense. And that's really what I was, looking at when it comes to him. So I'd re-sign him. I think those are your 5 best players too. I left off Trent Brown just because I don't think it's obtainable. Although if you could get Onwenu and Trent Brown back, that really helps out your O-line. I just wonder if Trent Brown's issue was a Patriots issue or if it was a Bill Belichick issue, because he seemed pretty disgruntled at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think for Trent specifically, I think it was probably like more a Bill Belichick issue than a Patriots issue. I don't know like what issue he could directly have with the organization. I feel like most of it's when Belichick was the GM and the coach. It's tough to does he have a gripe with Mayo or does he have a gripe uh with like Robert Kraft or Jonathan Kraft? I doubt that. But in terms of the free agents, I'm mostly on the same page as you on Onwenu. The whole talk today about Onwenu not being tagged or not likely to be tagged and likely to leave. He is priority number 1. And I like Duggar. I think Duggar is a guy that you can re-sign for a pretty reasonable amount. I think you could get him in the 3 years, 39, maybe 4 years at 13, 13 a year. What does that end up being? For 52? Yeah,
Yeah,
52.
52.
4 years, 52. I think that's his range. I think that's pretty reasonable. But if you have to choose between one or the other, it's on Wenu. It has to be on Wenu. So I don't, I know the tag is higher, and I know that's a factor, obviously. And do you want to necessarily tag a right tackle and be paying a right tackle, which the regular franchise tag is 21 million, I believe, maybe 21 and change. I'm not gonna be I'm not gonna be upset if Duggar, leaves. I want him back. I think he's a pretty good player. I'll gladly take him back. I think he's worth that 12 to 13 range. He's a good box player. He's essentially a linebacker, hybrid. But
Yep.
if you lose on Wenu, like you have to fill both spots. And I've been kind of vocal about this in past pods that I don't think that if you bring in Onwenu back and and even if it's just a franchise tag, it immediately cuts one of the two tackle needs in half. And I personally think that like him playing left tackle isn't a scenario where it's like a worst case scenario. Like if they went into, they had Onwenu this year, they brought him back and they drafted a right tackle. Like I think Onwenu would be perfectly fine on the left tackle. Do I think it's his best spot? No. I think it's right guard's theoretically his best spot,
It
but
is.
I think he can be a solid left tackle. And I think he showed that early on in his career. I think he could be a solid left tackle. So he's priority number one. I think where we differ a little bit is on Kendrick Bourne. I like the player. Um, in my I shy away from like being vocal for wanting him back, mostly for reasons that don't have to do with him. I think he's a solid player. It's not like he's going to cost a lot, but the reality is they have Devontae Parker that if he's cut, they save no money. They have a Juju under contract who, again, if they cut, they save no money. They have Tyquan Thornton here who, I don't know what the hell they do with them. Maybe they dump him or not, or maybe they cut him. They'll probably lose money because he's a second round pick. And then they have Douglas. If you bring Kendrick Bourne back and you have to keep one of the other two, I just don't want them to be in a situation where Bourne is like your number two going into the season. And I think they need to be aiming higher for that. And instead of using, I don't know what he'll cost, maybe $6 to $8 million on him, I rather be using it to get fill other positions of higher quality players. I won't be like angry if he's back. Like I said, I think he's a decent player, but they need to be aiming higher at wide receiver. And because they have these commitments to Parker and Juju, I just don't see it incredibly feasible. I would probably put Hunter Henry a little higher on my list just because I think he's rock solid. You know what you're going to get from him. He's a type of Patriot guy, and not that we're going to continue the whole Patriot way that we've seen, in New England, but he's a Patriot type of player. Hardworking, you know what you're going to get from him. He's pretty reliable, and if you get an offense that is not god awful, he can be pretty damn productive. So I in a big picture, I think Henry and Onwenu are the two most important. But I do want to just we're so focused on the offense and fans are so focused on the offense that I think they're just going to assume that the defense will be good again. We lost Guy and Phillips, and not that they played huge roles, but you know, where I feel like people are just giving too much of an assumption that the defense will be great again or really
Yeah,
good again.
they gave too much credit to the defense last year too. I'm sick of hearing the top 5, top 10 defense thing. The reason being, if you look at the teams that they played defense really well against, there wasn't a whole lot of good teams on that list. The Jets. There wasn't a whole bunch. The best defensive performance, and I'll stand by this, was that when they let the Chargers beat them 6-0. They had Herbert healthy, and that was probably the best offense that they did the best against. So I don't think the defense played well against good teams last year. So if you want to win, if you're like truly trying to be a playoff team and just assume, yeah, they'll do good against bad teams. But when they face the real deal, they let up 25 points. They let up 30 points. And that's not what a good defense does. A good defense is able to hold. Look at the playoffs. Good defenses held good offenses to less than 20 points, and we're tough. I don't think we have that tough defense. I think we need to make gains there too. I made a list of some potential free agents, and I kept seeing some pretty decent defenders out there.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we'll transition into is like targets for them in free agency. We could go down in the list, 50 guys. Big picture, there's not a ton at wide receiver. We'll see what happens. T. Higgins is expected to be tagged. Michael Pittman might be tagged. We'll see about Ridley and we'll see about, Evans and stuff like that. But there's not a ton at wide receiver. There's not a ton of tackle either. I could see a scenario where they spent a good amount of money on defense. and fans won't love the concept, but if they invest heavy in the draft offensively, a good way to counter that is to load up on the defensive side of the ball and make sure that that defense is still very good. Uh, and there's a ton of options. I mean, I'm sure you've looked at the list. Who are some guys that you're kind of head over heels of potential targets for them on either side of the ball? Coming from another team this year.
I did take a good look at the free agency, but one thing I didn't take a look at is like if they're potentially going to get re-signed or franchise tagged. So some of these guys, I was like, oh, he's a free agent. And then my thought was, why would they ever let him walk? And then my second thought was, why would he ever want to sign here? Like, that's another thing to consider when we're talking about these free agents. I'm looking at them and I want them, but like, we would probably have to overpay for some of these guys to come to a team that isn't expected to win. A lot of people in free agency, it's reverse of the draft, right? The draft, you get the best player if you're the worst. But in free agency, you're likely to get the best player if you're the best. Like the Chiefs probably have the best chance at getting someone over us with the lowest ranked. But with that being said, I really like Patrick Queen. I want to add to the linebacking core. I really like him. I saw Micah Hyde's available. And if you're losing Duggar and Phillips and Jalen Mills, you're really down to one safety in Peppers. So you need to add Imagine Peppers and Hyde. That would be a pretty insane safety duo. Probably not likely, but was a fantasy of mine as I was skimming through. A lot of the help that I saw from the free agency was on the offensive side, but Bud Dupree was another name I saw out there on defense. I'm looking at my list now. Yeah, it's mainly offense, to be honest with you. But I do think they need a bolster. I'm kind of on the opposite page of you. I would rather go to the draft for the defense and go to free agency for offense if the player's available. You mentioned how scarce some of the wide receivers are. Like, if you're
Yeah,
going to the wide receiver, there's just nobody there, then you have to go to the draft.
that's the thing. I don't. There's a fine line with this free agent class of, I do want them in free agency or via trade to address either tackle or wide receiver to the point where, like, if you don't land a guy in the draft early, that you're not like screwed out of luck at the position. I
Yep.
think ideally, and it's the tackle position is kind of limited in free agency, but there will be trade options available, and I'm sure there's going to be another tackle or two that will be cut. But I would love for them to address the tackle situation so that when they go into the draft, they that if they didn't land a tackle in the first 3 rounds, you're not looking at the team and saying they're screwed at tackle. The Pats kind of tried to do that a little bit last year, with
Yeah.
bringing Trent Brown back, and then Reef and Anderson, and they were going to try to makeshift it and make it all work. It obviously didn't. But
They got Sal out of it, though. They
yeah,
drafted 3
yeah.
linemen and they got Sal. They got one. That's what I want them to do this year. Pick 3 and land on one. That's fine with me.
I mean, that's just my biggest thing though in free agency is this offensive side of the ball. It's it's not great, and I don't want them to overpay for mediocre players. We saw them do that in 2021 when you brought in, Hunter Henry was a reasonable contract, but they overpaid for Jonnu Smith, who was,
Yeah.
a solid tight end, but not what he was really worth. They overpaid for Nelson Aguilar on a 2-year deal, giving him 11 mil. Kendrick Bourne, like, was a reasonable value, and he was reasonable during his time here. But as a whole, they overpaid for mediocre talent, and I just don't want them to get into that same situation where they overpaid and they threw like, they threw 4 years at $20 million a year to like Marquise Brown because they're desperate for talent. And not that Marquise Brown is a bomb or anything. I think he's a pretty good
Sure.
player. But like you get what I'm saying. I don't want them to overpay and overspend for mid-tier offensive guys just because they feel like it's such a desperate need. I'd rather them hit on the free agents, and that seems to be primarily defensive guys at the moment, but we'll see. I like there will be it's almost a guarantee that there will be, one or two tackles that are potentially on the trade market, or one or two wide receivers that are potentially on the trade market, and everyone will assume that that means you're giving up a high pick. I mean, what did like Cleveland give for Amari Cooper when they got traded from Dallas? I think it was like a fourth and a sixth or something like that. You know what I
It's a
mean? So just
steal.
because a guy's available via trade doesn't mean it's, you're giving up a first or second round pick either.
I feel like the Patriots are going to go underwhelming when it comes to the free agent. The top three guys, they'll get the fourth or the fifth best guy because the top guys are going to go to the best teams. There's like Gabe Davis out there. Like I liked when I watched them play the Bills and I saw Gabe Davis. I thought he was fine. He could plug in. If you get guys at really good deals, I'm okay with signing the fourth or fifth best guy to instantly boost
Yeah,
the entire roster, right? Like if you were to add
yeah.
like give me a running back and a wide receiver that has played before, that could, instantly the roster goes up a whole jump. Give me
Big thing money
DeAndre.
wise though is I think that they free agents chase the money more than anything. And so while I think like you'll get usually older vets that really want to ring that will chase these, to the Chiefs or the 49ers and stuff like that. And you could see, I don't know, let's just throw Hunter Henry in the mix. The Patriots could offer him 2 years, 30 million. If the Chiefs offered him 2 years, 28, could he go and chase that championship with the Chiefs? Sure. But in the end, like these players are chasing money so much for good reason because their contracts aren't guaranteed that if you pay, they'll come. You know what I mean? The Pats have a shit ton of cap space. Um, if you pay, they'll come. The biggest thing that people need to recognize is that if the Patriots is smart, they're not going to approach this free agency like we need to be contenders in 2024. Are they going to try to be? Sure. But like people need a big picture of this situation that it's likely a multi-year rebuild and they shouldn't and can't be throwing cash around at mid-tier players just to get them here. Like I said, it's going to be a multi-year, situation.
Oh, the rebuild or the build that they're currently in. I'm almost considering them in year zero just because of the Mayo and the whole new coaching staff and the Bill leaving. Like that was a chapter in itself. Now we're on to like year zero of the rebuild. It feels that way. It doesn't feel like we're in year five, or four, whatever the hell year we're in. Cam Newton and three max. Yeah, so year five. Um, it doesn't feel that we're going to be like, oh, we're back this year because it's year five of the rebuild. No, you're pretty much back
Yeah,
at zero, and it's going to come
people
down
think
to the draft and free agency.
people saw the CJ Stroud situation and are like, all right, like we can be like a playoff team next year. Like, all right, I'm not going to rule like anything out. Like, sure, but like people forget
Yeah,
that like Nick Caserio like rebuilt Houston for multiple years prior to Stroud getting there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like they added. Go ahead.
You had me take a look at the hot takes from last week because I had to get my hot take for the end of the show, and one of them was your boy saying that they're going to make the playoffs. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it was certainly a hot take.
respectfully, they're not close to being a playoff team right now. As the current roster sits, you know, I don't want this to be clipped when they sign Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and then, go super roster on us. And I'm like, well, they're definitely a playoff team now, but the way we're currently trending, we're just not, we got to be thinking 2-3 years down the line. And that's not a knock on your buddy. I love the faith. Last year, I was thinking, man, if we just had a quarterback, we could be a playoff team. There's always got to be hope alive. So I'm not here to kill the hope, but I'm also here to, I think, let's have our expectations set appropriately so we don't get disappointed at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is like everyone sees okay, if we cut JC, we're going to have like 88 million, I think it might be in cap space. Like in theory, that's enough money to like completely overhaul the roster. But the way you can like manipulate contracts and cap hits and stuff like that, like we saw with Henry. Henry signed
Cap
for
fake.
was it 13 million in a year, and like his year one cap was like 6. You had to pick it up in the end. Like this past year was, I don't know, 15 or
15.
16.
I'm looking at it
Yeah.
right now. 2021 was 6.8, then 15, then 15.5. So yeah, the cap is fake and
Yeah.
you can manipulate it.
So in theory, you could use that 88 million in cap space and like you could sign numerous big time players. Like really, like there's not anybody that they could easily sign the top 7 free agents and still comfortably be under the cap if that's how they wanted to manipulate it. And obviously that's not going to happen, but like, just playing for fun, and let's exclude the QBs. Chris Jones, Josh Allen, who's the DN, T Higgins,
Leonard
Brian
Williams,
Burns. Obviously they're not signing all these D line guys, but you get what I'm saying. Like they could go and sign numerous big name
Buda
guys and throw
Baker.
cash at them. Yeah, but like it's just not incredibly logical. It's going to be a multi-year rebuild, and that's why I think they got to go into this free agency period and say, listen, we know that this is going to be a multi-year project. There are very few guys that they should consider that I would say like older veterans, because it's just not very logical. Like you're not going to be going and signing a 30-year-old, DN guy. It's just not very logical for this team. The only time, really, the only scenarios where I'm okay with going older players is offensively. For example, Tyron Smith from Dallas. He's 32, 33. Is he a long-term fix at left tackle? No. But if they, address other positions and they want Tyron Smith and they overpay for a 1 year of Tyron Smith to protect their rookie QB, that's okay. If they went and got like a Mike Evans, or if Keenan Allen was cut or something like that, a veteran guy that can be reliable for the rookie QB, that's a situation. But other than that, I'm looking at free agency. If you're over the age of like 28, I for the most part, I'm not really going to be considering you unless you're maybe a wide receiver or a tackle.
or you
I'm not
project them
wasting.
to, or if you're signing them to 4 years at 30 years old and you're like going to have them as a 34-year-old, you really have to be hoping that they're going to be good all 4 years, because I don't think in year three of that person's contract, we could be contending in year three of that person's contract. And it's good to have them. Now you have them year three and year four of their contract right up until the end of their career while you're trying to contend. So it almost helps
Correct.
you down the line, but only, like you said, if it has an immediate impact too. A veteran wide
Yeah, like
receiver
I said,
helps out
like
your rookie
I
quarterback.
would
You
over
got to help out the roster.
I would overpay and maybe extend myself like past the comfort zone for like Mike Evans, knowing that last year might not be worth it, because you know if you have a rookie QB, you need reliable guys. And like for example, Mike Evans is like a good example, and I mentioned Keenan Allen is he could be cut from LA. Like those are two guys that if you have a rookie QB, like if you Google ideal wide receivers for a rookie QB in terms of like the short term helping him develop, it's like guys like that.
Big body,
Reliable.
physical.
Keenan Allen has his a little bit of an injury issues and stuff like that, but Keenan Allen is a QB's best friend. He is like what everyone prayed Jacoby Myers could be, like a peak. He's just always open. He's reliable. He's consistent when he's on the field. And then Mike Evans is Mike Evans. Everyone knows him.
Yeah.
10 years in the league, 10 1,000-yard receivings. He would be like a Drake Maye. If Drake Maye is a New England Patriot, like Mike Evans is a dream target for Drake Maye. But like I said, other than that, like free agent wise, if you're looking on the defensive side of the ball and that guy is over 27, 28 years old, depending on their position, like I don't even know if I'm considering them. Maybe there's a few off the top of my head. Um, I'm not really considering them. There's a select few that like, maybe on 1 year deals. Like I thought about like, what would be your thoughts on bringing back like someone like Stephon Gilmore for on a 1 year deal, or even I guess a two.
1 year deal, I would sign almost any. I'd take a flyer on almost anyone. Reason being is you have all this cap space, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? Like
Yeah,
it's there to be used. The 2 year deal, now
yeah.
you got me thinking.
I should specify more of what I'm saying is like I'm not going to like a 30-year-old DN and giving him a 3 year deal, or I'm not going
Not
to like
unless I
Stephon.
Not at
Yeah, but
the end, just because of the position type. You know what I mean? But I'll give a 3-year deal to a defender if they're gonna be good in year 3, right? Usually, when you give a
it's a
3-year deal in the
it's a
NFL, you're
fine
like,
line.
I want them. Like a 3-year deal in the NFL, you're like, I hope I get 2 good years out of them, and hopefully the third year I can get out of it, or I can trade them, or we just hang on to the contract. But this 3-year
Right.
deal, if the
Yeah.
Patriots sign one, they have to be good in year 3. They can't be just hanging on and using
Yeah,
the
exactly.
contract.
Like I said, it's not like it's not like, okay, you're over the age of 27 and you're not being considered. There are some, but just in a general sense, the Patriots should be trying to, grow younger talent and reset this roster, get younger. And in free agents wise, like, there's not a ton of sense, especially defensively, to be adding like, 28, 29, 30, 31-year-old guys. I'd rather them go on the younger side of things like that.
Yep.
One guy that just screams to me is I think I would pay pretty big bucks for Legarius Sneed. He he is kind of he impressed me a lot this year, a lot. Yeah, I thought he was going to be a little bit more than just. Excuse me, I thought he was just going to be more of a slot guy, but he moved out wide this year and he was very good this year for Kansas City, and not to mention stealing them from Kansas City would be a bonus as well. Um, what other defensive guys do you like in terms of filling needs? This team defensively, I think, can realistically add at any position. I don't think there's a single position where you're like, that's not they're not even going to think about addressing it.
No, I think the position that they need to address, if again, what happens to Duggar is important, but safety, right? Peppers is a very particular type of safety. He's not that like center fielder, like a McCourty was, Peppers is more willing to come up and bang closer to the line of scrimmage. So I would really like to see them have a center field safety because Duggar's not that either.
So I want
Um,
Cameron Kitchens in
Cameron,
the
yeah, I
draft.
mean, I just sorted
I
it
love
by,
that guy too.
I just sorted
No,
the
yeah,
free agency by defensive backs
Kitchens
because
is a rookie. He's coming from University of Miami. Uh, he's just a freaking baller. But we'll get into the draft in a few minutes.
yeah, maybe they
Uh,
re-signed Mills, right? And because he played safety for them and is listed as corner, I think, often on depth charts and rosters, but was a safety mainly at the end of the year. So he could be a re-sign. I would like to see them address some of those, like you said, maybe not so glaring position needs on defense, but more so some depth. I think their linebacker core could use some work too, especially if Uche walks. I think the line, we're all set. We're all set with the line. Maybe draft someone for the line, but really, and cornerback, you can always use people. But again, I think we have good corners. So it would be safety and linebacker would be the two positions needs. I just sorted the free agency to give you some names. Like you said, you mentioned Gilmore. I mentioned Hyde. I'm trying to see who else is actually out there. I throw Buda Baker, but I think they have just because they have like so much cap space if they cut him, and Arizona sucks. So would they be inclined to do so? Um, let's see who else is out there.
yeah, I mean, like I said, there's not really a single spot on the defense that like you look at and say that's filled. We're not even going to really consider. They could they use an upgrade on the other edge across from Judon and Judon, like, for another topic. I think they could consider trading him this year. He's 31. Like, could they try to maximize his value and trade him? But that's another topic. But they could go on the other side of the edge. We don't know what's going to happen with Uche. Wise, I think, is on the last year of his deal. Even next up the middle, next to Barmore. Obviously we're throwing like
Like
hypotheticals, but
Gottschall,
like he's I don't know. He's decent. He's decent, but like again, he's on the final year.
but
You
two
know what I mean?
tackles. I'm fine with having my second D tackle be a D tack, like a second guy. I would rather
Yeah,
them run 3 down
I'm not.
linemen.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's like interior defensive line is like some type of big need, but like I don't think that they should just like push back and not really consider. What if like not to throw Chris Jones's name out there, but like if you were looking for to just add talent to this team, which is what this team needs. If you're looking to add actual talent to this team, and you put Chris Jones next to Christian Barmore, or you put Wilkins from Miami next to Christian Barmore, coming up the freaking middle every play would be absolute hell for another team. So that's why it's like I'm not considering any spot kind of any bit taken at any position on this team. Am I looking at this and saying that position is filled? We don't need anybody, which is kind of a fun concept because that puts everybody on the table in free agency.
Yeah, I'd say cornerback might be my only one, right? Like our top two corners are better than the corners that are available in the free agency. So if you signed, one of the top corners, they would still be competing for the second or third spot. I think Gonzo's got the first spot locked down. He's going to cover your best
Yeah,
wideout every.
J.C. Jackson, but even think about even corner like J.C.
Jonathan Jones.
Jackson, who Jackson will he could be back on a reduced contract. But like even Jonathan Jones is what 30, 31 years old maybe. I don't know off the top of my head. Uh and we're getting Marcus Jones back, but like if they went and added
He's 30.
so he's 30, he'll be 31 basically at the start of the year. If they went and added a L'Jarius Sneed, just an example, or even Gilmore in a short-term deal, like now you're putting your secondary in a position to be a very, very, very good secondary. And when
Yeah.
you face defenses in teams like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and you face a Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in Miami and stuff like that, if you got great corners, it could certainly make a big difference. So I don't even want to rule out corner as a potential need.
No, I'm not. I'm not ruling it out. You always need depth at corner, and we saw that this year, right? Gonzo goes out, and you need to have people need to step up. But Gonzo, JC, Jonathan Jones, Brian, you can go down the list. We have 4 or 5 people. We have our whole starting corners all set. But
Yeah,
you're right. If we got a
we'll
great
see if
corner in here,
JC's back. If JC's
well,
back,
true.
then it trickles down the list even a little bit more. And I think there's a little bit better chance that he's back than people think. I don't think he really
Especially
wants
with the
to
release
leave,
and a release and a re-sign is very possible too. It's not like we
or
have to
just a
take him at
restructure.
right a
Lower
restructure.
that
Yeah, either or.
lower that 14 million. He's owed 1 year 14 million cash, but it's zero guaranteed, so they can cut him for free. I
Right.
could see him taking a 2-year, $14 million deal with 9 of it guaranteed. So it would put it would kind of guarantee him here for at least this year. Never mind a little bit of next year of guaranteed
And
money.
he has
Um,
incentive to accept that too, because the consequence is if you don't accept our deal, we're going to cut you prior to June 1 and you'll make whatever you resign for. So if you want to make some money, it would be worth working with us as opposed to just going resigning somewhere else or getting cut. So yeah, I think you look for his contract to get reworked. I'm very likely that they'll rework that contract. They're not going to carry that into 2024.
yeah. All right. Let's transition. We're definitely going a little bit, uh, past our time, but it's all right. We got a little bit more.
I'm enjoying
Um,
it.
the number 3 pick, the primarily debate. Excuse me. Primary debate is Maye versus Daniels. Uh, we obviously as Patriots fans and the Patriots front office at the moment don't have a ton of control of which one we will have the option to choose or not. Obviously, the Commanders can take, they're ahead of us, so they could take either one, and we have to decide if the other one is worth it or not. What is your viewpoint on Maye versus Daniels? Who do you have higher, and how do you kind of evaluate both of these guys?
You said that we have to pick who falls to us. I disagree. If I'm the New England Patriots, I'm evaluating all 3 quarterbacks, falling in love with one, and going after that position in the draft.
Yeah,
So if I fall in love
I
with
agree.
May
That's a little bit of a different discussion, but you get what I'm saying. Just for how the picks currently stand.
in a bubble, yeah, no, and so I faded myself on this decision, and I'll explain why. So my instinct was to go May, pocket passer. Got the strong arm, can make all the throws. Something about Daniels with his ability to be a passer. He had like the best QBR in college football last year, and be able to run the ball with some pretty good speed. I just feel like that's what the NFL is now. So while I was fighting the urge to just duplicate Tom Brady and find this guy who will sit in the pocket and make passes, I faded myself and said it's got to be Daniels. It's got to be Daniels because he has the ability to break out of the pocket when the line breaks down, which our line will surely break down. That's not why I'm picking him, though. You don't pick him because you have a bad O-line, right? You pick him because he can get out of those situations. And if you look at winning quarterbacks, they're able to get out of these situations. There's other people talking about like trading out of the spot and everything like that. And I have a whole take for that. And I know that's kind of where we're headed next after this. But if you're making me pick between the two, I'm more of a fan of Daniels than I am of Maye. But that's not to say I don't really like both of them. And that's not to say I don't understand that this is a gamble. You have to play this gamble in the NFL, right? Like these three guys, Williams, Maye, and Daniels, one of them will work out, maybe two of them won't, vice versa. Two of them work out. Not all three will work. That's almost like a lock that all three aren't going to work out. So you are taking a gamble, but it's a gamble that I think you need to take, and I would do it with Daniels. Where do you stand, Maye or Daniels?
So I released an article today, kind of ranking them. I have Maye a touch ahead of Daniels. I get both sides of it, and basically, not to go too much into depth with it, but I view Maye as a higher floor. I mean, excuse me, a higher ceiling, and
Yep.
Daniels having a higher floor. Maye has more work to kind of get there. He's a little less polished. Daniels, I think, is a little bit more ready for the NFL. Um, but I think Maye has the superstar potential a little bit more than Daniels. Uh, Josh Allen is a pretty reasonable comp for him. He's a little bit smaller than Josh Allen, but Maye's plenty. He's a more than enough size. But just play wise, I remember a couple weeks ago I put out a quote, a draft profile on a player, and I said, "All right, who is this guy?" And a lot of responses was, "Well, that sounds like Drake May." And I gave it about an hour, and I said, "You know what? It's Josh Allen."
Hmm.
It was a draft profile from NFL.com of Josh Allen, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. Oh, whoa, wow, longer than that. He's been around the league for a little bit longer. We're getting old, but yeah, it was Josh Allen. And so I think there's a lot of similarities coming into the league where they're big arms, they're athletic QBs, they can make any and all throws. They're very dynamic in and out of the pocket. They can move around. They can make any type of angle throw. Uh, the downside of Maye is he's a little bit less polished than Daniels. And so when I'm comparing the two, I think the big picture is when you have a top three pick, the goal is to find a star. And not that I don't think Daniels can't be a star. I'm very high on Daniels, and I will be more than fine if they take either of them. I just view Daniels as, when you're in the top three, you're drawn to trying to find a Josh Allen tier than like a Deshaun Watson tier. And not that Deshaun Watson isn't. And when I say Deshaun Watson, I don't mean
Yeah.
2023 Deshaun Watson. I mean, older Deshaun Watson. He's a little bit different than Watson. He's a little bit skinnier. He's a little bit more dynamic with his feet, but I also think Watson was a little bit better passer as well. But it's give or take. They're very close prospects. They both have advantages. I do think in why I think I'm a little bit drawn more to just trying to get myself to fall in love with Maye, and not that it's difficult at all, is
Hmm.
I think Daniels fits the Commanders' offense and Cliff Kingsbury offense very well. So I'm kind of just like buying into the concept that the Commanders will end up being higher in Daniels. And I know Dan Quinn and Adam Peters over there and Cliff Kingsbury, they can't miss. Like they're new to the job. If they screw this up, they could be on a quick hook and out the door pretty damn quickly in Washington. Um, Obviously, their new ownership isn't afraid to make changes. So I think that they might end up leaning Daniels, which would leave us Drake May. And if they take Drake May, I will be very happy. Even if he's not a week one starter, I'm fine with letting him sit in a scenario as well. But yeah, it's very close in the end, and I just lean Drake Maye just because of the upside. Because if I'm taking a pick that high, I want to kind of shoot for the stars.
You also get 2 more years. He's 2 years younger than Daniels too. So 21 compared to like 23. Just to put it in perspective, Brock Purdy's
Yeah.
24. So like the you got you got a lot of development that these guys are going to go through. So what does Drake Maye look like at 23, which is the current age of Daniels? He might have far surpassed him.
Yeah.
Daniels
And
years might look like Lamar Jackson. You know what I mean? So these guys go through a level of development, and I think it's awkward that we pick them at this age because they're like mid development. So it's like hard to project because you don't know what the leaps and bounds are going to do the next couple of years. So that's where I like kind of exit the conversation because I'm like, I'm not an NFL scout. I don't go to work on Monday like spending my time looking at
to be
tendencies and
fair,
seeing.
most of the NFL scouts miss too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And
The percentage on them hitting is so low. Never mind me. So it's like I'm going to delegate the decision to the New England
yeah,
Patriots. I want them to be in love with the pick. They can't take whoever falls to them. They have to go out and get the guy that
just
they like
because, correct.
just because. Oh, we're here at 3. Daniels was our guy. He got picked by the Commanders. Let's go, May. We need a quarterback and he'll be fine. No, that can't be the way they approach it. That I think it's more my take is more about approach than it is who.
Yeah, and I ran into this, and I was having a conversation with someone earlier about McCarthy versus Penix because I put McCarthy 4 and Penix 5 on my list, and he was like, "Well, if a team drafted McCarthy and he ends up what Penix is right now, that would probably be a bonus." And I said, "Okay, that's sure, but you're not drafting for right now. If you're taking a quarterback in round 1, you're not taking a quarterback with the hopes that he'll be a top 20 QB. You know what I mean? You're not taking McCarthy. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you're the Raiders and you take McCarthy at 13, or Denver or Minnesota takes him. You're not taking this guy with the hope that he's like, a top 20 guy. You're hoping that he's a top 10 guy. Could he be a top 20 and you're okay with it? Sure. But like the guy's argument was like, oh, what is Penix's? He's 24. Like, are you saying he's not developed, but he has no more room to develop? And I'm like, well, kind of like what you just mentioned with Maye versus Daniels. McCarthy's 21. Penix is 24. Penix has had quite literally 3 more years, or at least 2.5, depending on their birthdays exactly, of
Yeah.
development. So it's very fair to look at Penix versus McCarthy and then similar to Daniels versus Maye and say, how much more does Penix have to develop? You know what I mean? I look at Penix and say, I think he is good enough inside the pocket where I think he could be an NFL quarterback. But do I think he's going to be a top 10 guy? I don't really see it. I struggle
So
to see it.
So
Go
here's my
ahead.
thing on quarterbacks in the draft. And I was debating if this was going to be my take at the end, but I swapped it out with a Red Sox take. So I'm going to give it to you here. But it's the silver hot take of the day. How's that sound?
Go ahead.
To win a Super Bowl, you need to pick a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. Quarterbacks that are taken outside. I have the list. So I have the proof
Mhm.
that you don't win. You need to be picked in the first 3 rounds. And so if you bear with me, here it is. So quarterbacks that were not picked in the first round that won a Super Bowl. Obviously, Tom Brady won 7 of them and picked in the 6th round. So let's just get
He's an
that out of the
anomaly.
way.
Yeah.
He's an anomaly. It's just like, let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
But he's the only one who's won more than one. There hasn't been another, and I'm talking since 2000. I just did what's like the past 20 something years, like the relevancy, right? The 90s just doesn't relate to what we're doing these days, in my opinion. So Nick Foles won. He was a 3rd round pick. Russell Wilson won. He was a 3rd round pick. Drew Brees won. He was a 2nd round pick. Brad Johnson won in 2003. So he was a 9th round pick in 1992. So I don't know if that's completely relevant or not. But then Kurt Warner also won one in the year 2000, the very first year I started this, and he was an undrafted quarterback, right? So basically saying, besides Brad Johnson and Kurt Warner, you need to be a top 3 pick to win. And you probably might just win one. Like you'll sneak in there and win one. But if you want to win multiple Super Bowls and be a legitimate quarterback that wins Super Bowl, you need to go in the first round. And here's the people who won in the first round. There's 4 of them that have repeated, right? You got Stafford, legitimate quarterback. Pat Mahomes, he's won 3. Peyton Manning, he won 2. He's top 5 quarterback of all time. Joe Flacco won 1 in 2013. He was drafted in 08. Eli Manning has a couple. He's another repeat first round pick. Ben Roethlisberger's got a couple. He's a first round pick. And then you got Trent Dilfer, right? So first round picks are where it's at when it comes to win Super
In
Bowls. You
Aaron
need a pick
Rodgers.
in the first round. Aaron Rodgers. Yep. You need a pick in the
Yeah.
first round. You can't pick in the second. I don't want these second and third round guys just based on like the history. The history repeats itself. First round picks win Super Bowls and multiple Super Bowls. If you're not a first round pick, you might get lucky and win one, or your name's Tom Brady.
Yeah, occasionally you'll find a Dak in like a Russell Wilson, but like 75, 80% of the time, these top guys are coming in the first round. Not that they have to be top, 3 picks. Obviously, Mahomes, Watson, Rodgers. There's a handful of guys that didn't go in the top 3 or 5 that are very good. Josh Allen was 7th overall, but they're primarily going to be first round guys. And not that I'm against them. And we're gonna probably have to skip over the whole concept of trading down, but not that like if they didn't go quarterback, I'm completely against taking a shot on a second or third round guy. But like it's just that outside of the first round, like that your hit rate to the point where that guy is going to be like a top 15 QB is very low. Very
Yeah.
low. Like maybe 10-15%. Not that it's like super high even in the top 5, but it's
Well, if you
certainly
pick it in
higher
the
than 10
top,
to 15
you have the top 3 picks. So I feel like you have your hit rate out of those is probably like 25 to 40% of the time you can hit in that area, right? If you have the right scouting. As you go down, that 25 to 40 is like now you're at like 10%. Now once you get into like the second and third round, I think you're like below 10% of the time, probably. But the data proves it too, right? How often are you going to get Nick Foles, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees? Those are the names. Those are the only people picked outside of
Yeah.
the first round that were worth their weight.
Yeah.
How often? 3 out of the past 23 years, there's been someone outside the first round worth their weight.
Yeah, and not to I guess to go back to the coaching hires, um I'm a little bit more confident in Alex Van Pelt's and McAdoo's ability to evaluate talent
Yep.
a little bit even more than I look forward to their coaching ability. We'll see what
Yeah.
their coaching ability is in Alex Van Pelt as a play call and all that. I'm not gonna like make a take one way or another, but they have I think they have good eye for evaluating talent. So they could play a big factor, in that.
They better. That's where I
Yeah,
stand. They better freaking get this right. Imagine getting Daniels or whoever they pick, and this guy just blows, and they're bringing
yeah,
in freaking
yeah,
Zappy again. They can't be there. They gotta. It's like if you watch the documentary on the Patriots when Kraft walked up and said, "Hey," to Belichick, "Hey, I really want Bledsoe," and Belichick was like, "Nah, I'm gonna stick with Brady." And then Kraft's message was like, "Fine, but you better be right." And that's what I kind of feel like. Whoever you pick, better be right. Can't blow this one.
yeah. It's the biggest pick they've had since Drew Bledsoe, basically. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly important, but let's transition. We could do about 15-20 minutes of
Let's
Red
do it.
Sox here. Um, the Boston Red Sox are in spring training. We saw over the last week, Sam Kennedy, interestingly enough, divulged a conversation that Pedroia called Kennedy. Oh, excuse me, Kennedy or the front office supposedly called Pedroia to see if he
Yep.
was coming down to spring training. Um, I think he, coaches with his kids and stuff like that. He said no. And then while on the phone with them, Pedroia supposedly, according to Kennedy, to him and Core, voiced displeasure of what the hell are you doing, basically comments. Obviously, we don't know the in depths of those comments, but Pedroia voiced his displeasure with seeing who's still on the market in the current team. And then Devers yesterday, and through his translator, essentially said, "You know what we need. I know what we need. They know what we need. But I can't talk about it." Pretty strong words from one of the top guys in your organization. You could
The top
argue the
guy.
face of yeah. You could argue the face. They're pushing Tristan Casas
Get out of here with
as the
that.
face.
Rafi Devers is MVP quality. He's a beast.
Yeah, I think like in terms of the face, Devers doesn't have. I don't think the interest to be like the face of the franchise type of guy. he is the best player on the team right now, best hitter on the
You
team
get
right
you
now.
also got to throw out there he has a translator, right? So it's tough for him to
Yeah,
speak
so
to
it's a little
us.
bit difficult. So they're definitely pushing Costas's movement, and for good reason. I mean, he's a very bright future, and he has
Yeah, I
potential
like
to
Costas
break out
too.
into a star this year. But overall, what are your thoughts on the comments and kind of just the general displeasure that beyond Pedroia and Devers, Cora has made a couple comments. Kenley Jansen has made a comment or two of these guys not really being afraid to kind of say like they're not supporting us.
The Red Sox blow. Um, I'm wearing the Woo Sox hat because I put on my Red Sox hat and I was like, gross. Got to put the Woo Sox hat on. The Red Sox blow. Let me reiterate. They blow. Everything about them sucks. I can't stand them. And let me tell you, I love the Red Sox. So this is coming from someone who's been a lifelong fan and like that feeling as a kid that there was hope every year and that this team could do it. Even before we won the World Series in 04, there was hope each year that could be legitimate. This year, I am not hopeful, right? And the reason being is the front office. We could be hopeful. If they could just make a few signings, we could have some hope. And I'll get to that later about why we should be hopeful. And I have a pitch for Red Sox fans to get on board where we don't have to support the front office, but we can still support the team. And I'll explain how. But yeah, when Devers speaks out, your top dog, it's bad. It's kind of like if you're anytime your best player, if like Jason Tatum speaking out against something that's happening on the Celtics, things are bad at that point. Never mind that your closer's also speaking out and saying like legitimately the same things and what fans are thinking. And then to add on top of it, the Dustin Pedroia, right? Like they called him up and said, "Will you come to spring training?" He was like, "Absolutely not. I'd rather coach kids." That's where I'm at, right? And while you have me here, this is what you need to hear about yourself. So things are horrible with the Red Sox right now. Things are very bad. It almost seems like they're just okay taking our money for as long as possible, and they're waiting for like an absolute eruption. So that's where I'm at. We need to start erupting as Red Sox fans to let them know, F this, we're over it.
Yeah, I mean the team and the players and the coaches they're haven't hid uh their displeasure for this, and I get it. Like, I made a comment and I posted about it um, the other day, and it was quoting a Jansen comment. And you know, I think this more than ever before that Bloom was going into this offseason. His plan was to spend this offseason. And based off of, the budget last year and how he was building this team, all signs point to that he was going to be a spender this offseason. And with this current budget and the conversations that I've heard, I'm like pretty convinced that they knew Bloom was ready to go and they didn't want to spend the way that Bloom was going to be ready to do. And so they pushed him out the door to bring someone in, knowing that the next guy will fall into their suit. And not that Breslin is just their pony boy and all that, but like, if you're brand new on the job, it's a little bit different than the guy going into year 5 and ready to kind of take the team to the next level. Plain and simple, they have the opportunity to add significant talent this offseason. And we can get into that they still do. Uh, it's mid the end of February, towards the end of February, and they could still add multiple pieces, and all of a sudden, like the team looks completely different. But in a big picture thing, they had the opportunity to, and they just simply haven't done it. So day by day, there's a small part of me that takes a little pride because I was a Bloom defender and that it wasn't everything was getting thrown on him, but it just seems like ownership doesn't care. And to speak of ownership doesn't care, John Tomasi came out the other day and said, now this I wouldn't call this a report, um, but basically he hinted at the concept that he thinks it's John Henry specifically who's leading the charge of not spending. And that him and Tom Warner and maybe even Sam Kennedy are kind of not really seeing eye to eye of how this budget is for the Boston Red Sox. Um, you know, do you have any thoughts there on that possible, I guess, disagreement? and kind of what that means for the next coming years of ownership's decisions to spend money.
Well, I mean, Werner basically said, I think he used the words full throttle when talking about the offseason. If this is full throttle, holy moly. This, like, if he says it again next year, are we going to be like, oh, like last year, full throttle, or like for real full throttle? Because this is not full throttle. And that, I think he believed it when he said it. I don't think he said it like, I'm lying to these people right now. I think he said it because he believed it. And why there would be a Henry versus Warner is because Henry was like, nah, we're not going to be full throttle, right? Because he kind of has this, the final say. He's his boss. If you just look at the percentage of the ownerships and yada yada yada, he has to go to him for the decision. So I would be pissed too if me and my boss were talking and thought we were on the same page. We're going to go full throttle. I'm going to go out there and tell him now, and I tell him, and now we don't go full throttle, and people were like, "What the f? Why didn't you go full throttle?" Well, it's my boss, but I can't tell them it's my boss because that's just throwing my own team under the bus. I'd be pissed at him behind closed doors. Be like, what? Will you go out there and take some accountability for this? Why am I, why do I have to eat this? And John Henry and accountability in the same sentence is like an oxymoron. This man takes zero accountability for anything.
He's
And
soft.
even,
He's soft.
yeah, he's so soft. And even when there's
He's
opportunities to show up and dodge the questions, he doesn't even show up to dodge them. He just dodges the whole opportunity to show up. So this man's a loser. I hate him. I can't stand this front office. They need to sell this team and bring someone else in. Because I want hope back. I want that childish feeling back of the Red Sox at Fenway Park instead of the feeling of I have to boycott them, which is where I'm at. I'll go to Fenway once this year because it's my tradition and I love Fenway and I'm not going to let them take that away from me, but I'm not trying to give them any money. F that.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, like the whole comment in that it was kind of leaked out of, oh, they're waiting for these prospects to be ready and then they'll spend. It's the dumbest excuse I've ever heard. Like by far the dumbest excuse that ownership could have ever pushed out there. So if you're John Henry or Tom Warner or Sam Kennedy that pushed this concept that, oh, we're gonna wait until Maye and Rafaela and Teal and Roman Anthony are all ready and up here, and then we'll spend. It makes no sense. How about, like, if you truly believe that they're the next wave of stars on this team, two things. One, shouldn't have fired the guy that brought them there. Shouldn't
Right.
have brought the guy that brought in Maye, Anthony, and Teal. Shouldn't Nick York and the rest of these guys, Miguel Blees. Shouldn't have fired the guy that brought them here if you believe in them that much. Second, you can spend now knowing that they're going to be here soon. So if you believe in them that much, you know that when they get here, they're going to have a dirt cheap price. They're going to be making pennies on the dollar in their first, 3 to 4 years here before they even hit arbitration. You can spend now knowing for a fact that they're going to, if you believe in them that much, you can spend now knowing that it will kind of offset so that you're not overspending and have these massive payrolls. So that's why it's just the dumbest excuse that I have ever possibly heard to not spend. And it drives me through a wall when I heard that comment because it just doesn't it makes zero sense.
Well, and it's back to the argument that I was talking about earlier is if you're going to sign a 4-year contract and if you don't think you're going to win in year 1 and 2, have the expectation to win in year 3 or 4 of that 4-year contract. It's okay to sign people now to win in a year or two. It doesn't have to be for this year, but it kind of makes your team good this year too. What did their payroll drop from like 240 to like 195 or something like that? I mean, they're quite clearly just not doling out the cash for the players anymore. And
Yeah,
they could
they
still
were at
sign people and stay below.
they had number one payrolls in baseball when they won the World Series in 2019 and I think 2013. They were at 225 last year, which was below the tax. This year, it's seemingly they're at like 206, I think, right now. So they have plenty of room to, and that's before if they even decide to trade Jansen and unload half that contract. But like you said, like and I mentioned earlier, everything's in front of them kind of still. If they wanted to turn and sign Montgomery and Adam Duvall and maybe another like middle of the pack pitcher, it's all still right in front of them, and it's wild that free agency has played out this way. But like, if they signed at Montgomery, it's not just for 2023. You're signing him to a probably minimum 3-year deal. I think he'll end up getting. but 3 or 4 years, knowing that, 2025, 26, 27, he should still be a pretty good player for you. And it's just driving me absolutely nuts that they just, and people want to tell me it's not about the golf investments and, the Penguins investment and saving up money to buy an NBA team that everybody knows is going to happen. But when you go and do those things, and then your payroll, and you're the Boston Red Sox, and you have a $206 million payroll heading into opening day, it's just plain and simple unacceptable.
Yeah, no, the Red Sox blow, and they need to start signing something. I mean, that's just the general takeaway, right? The team isn't good enough. The management doesn't care. The players are pissed at the management. It feels like the stadium fills up with away fans now. And so it used to be like Red Sox fans that went to Fenway. Now you just got all these away teams coming in. I don't know. It just feels like the whole vibe of the Red Sox is wrong. And if they just started throwing the bag at some free agents and saying, "Look, we're trying now. You guys wanted these players. We got some of them. Like, let us be the GM for a little bit to win us back."
Yeah, and there's a little bit of brown check mark, I like to call it, guys whispering that Montgomery might actually happen, and we'll see. If we wake up tomorrow morning and it's Jordan Montgomery has signed a 3-year, $75 million deal with the Boston Red Sox, the vibe completely changes with Boston fans. And Montgomery's not even that big of a signing. Like, he's exactly what we need, but he's not even like some monumental signing. But if they went and signed Montgomery and Duvall, all of a sudden this team turns from, okay, they'll be lucky to win 82 games to now, okay, they might win 86 to 87 to 88. And maybe if some of these young guys develop, that they're a potential wild card team. But it's just, it's I'm sick and tired of the whole concept, and I'm usually a positive person with the team, but this is like, it's such a black and white situation with the Red Sox, where there's no argument to be made to try to be positive of what John Henry's doing.
They're not even
You know what I
selling you
mean?
the
So
hope anymore.
yeah, and like I said, I'm a positive person in a viewpoint, and when I talk about sports, I try to look at the bright side of things. That's very clear to anybody who follows me or hears me talk on this podcast. But it's a black and white situation with the Red Sox and ownership right now. You're just plain and simple not spending. So there's no hiding behind the reality of what the situation is. But
Yeah, they keep
let's
tripping
finish.
and falling on their face too. Like
Yeah,
they don't present themselves well either.
yeah, exactly. But all right, let's finish this up. We finish it up with the segment called hashtag State Your Take. I mentioned to you, it could be anything you want, Boston related. It could be, Ben last week, one of his State Your Take moments was ketchup doesn't belong on a hot dog. Wild take to me, but besides the point. What is your State Your Take moment? And then give a quick, 30-second explanation of why you feel that way.
All right. I know we just finished trashing the Red Sox. My state to take is the Red Sox could win the World Series this year if they make a few moves. And here's why. I have rationale and I have an example of why it could happen. So I'm not out here just saying it for whatever. Arizona Diamondbacks are my example. Won 52 games in 2021. They won 74 games in 2022 and were projected to win 78 games in 2023. If you follow the MLB, you kind of know where the story's going already. But that was 18% playoff odds and 0.4% World Series odds. They ended up winning 84 games, which is 6 above projected. They got hot in the playoffs and made it to the World Series. They lost in the World Series, but the point is a team that's projected to win 80 games, a la the Boston Red Sox, projected to win 80 games, can make it to the World Series by simply winning in the mid-80s, getting the wild card spot, and then getting hot. Now, the reason I said they can win the World Series if they make a few moves is, can this team get hot the way it's currently positioned? No, I don't think that they could go on a run and get hot. They're just all depressed about themselves, and they're probably trading at the deadline as opposed to acquiring at the deadline. But you make a few moves, and the team's excited again, and they're in that mid-80s. Like you said, a couple of those young players are starting to come around. All of a sudden, you get the wild card spot, and all these young guys are rah-rah, and they make the run. Red Sox could win the World Series. They've shown in the past that years where we doubt them and they're projected to be awful, they have a fluke season and can win. Why can't it happen again? My hot take is
Yeah,
the
I
Red
mean
Sox can win the World Series.
the 2013 team came out of nowhere, and obviously we dealt with a lot with like the marathon and all that year. But like you said, baseball is a wild sport, and a lot of times if you get hot in the right times, you can make runs. Um, like kind of like I mentioned, if they went and signed Montgomery and Duvall and maybe one other guy, like when you get into the playoffs, who knows what could happen. So you're in the playoffs, anything can happen, and you can make a run. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any bit crazy to go down that route to say if they added not even these monumental pieces, like it's not like trading for Juan Soto or trading for Tatis or whatever, it's something like that. It's just sign these pieces that are logical pieces to add to this team that aren't even huge, commitments, and it can make a massive difference for this team. You add those pieces, a few pieces in there, all of a sudden a wild card team, and who knows what could happen. Um, for me, my state your take moment, 3 years. And I don't even want. No, I'm not even going to put 3 years from now. I think 8 months from now. So 8 months from now is the end of October. You could even say 7 months from now, roughly 7, 8 months from now. We'll look at the Wilyer Abreu, I guess Emmanuel Valdez trade for Christian Vasquez as the single best move that Chaim Bloom made during his time here. I'm not going to sit here and say Willie Abreu is going to be a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but I am very high on this kid's bat. Reports out of spring training are that the Sox seem to be too. What I saw from him in the second half last year, and by the second half I mean the last like 6 weeks of the season, something like that, should not go. It's getting downplayed, and people aren't talking about enough how really overall impressive it was for the way he came up. And I know he's not like a super young prospect, but the way he came up and handled himself over the last month or so of the season. I think he'll not only have a pretty prominent role here, I think he has. Put this way, I took his odds of offense of AL Rookie of the Year. It's like the sixth best odds. I think it's a decent flyer option. He's obviously not the betting favorite for multiple reasons, but like I said, 8 months from now, we'll look back in this. We will say that this is the best move that Chaim Bloom made of the era of his tenure in not New England, in Boston. And overall, like there was a lot of turmoil when they traded Christian Vasquez away, but Willie Abreu could now be the starting, right fielder for the Boston Red Sox for the next 6+ years, and I think everybody will be pretty damn happy about that trade in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time the knock on the trade had nothing to do with the return and had more to do with the direction of the team and what it meant for the direction of the team. It's like, hey, we're trying to compete. Why are we trading away a good catcher? It just didn't make sense for the time. And I think you can compare it to like the Mookie Betts trade. Like when people traded Mookie Betts, they're like, why are we trading Mookie Betts? It's like, well, if you can't re-sign him, you got to get a return. And Verdugo is fine. He was a decent return. Now, in the moment, to my grave, I liked the trade, and I still do. You gotta look at the return in the long run, and I think you might be absolutely right about this.
Yeah, the Vasquez one, I think big picture, that trade deadline was the biggest blunder of Bloom's tenure here. If you were going to trade Vasquez, you should have unloaded the other pieces as well.
Yeah.
And should have just sold off big time and got under the tax. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, we could do the whole episode on what they blew at the last trade deadline.
But yeah, big picture, I'm very high on Willie Abreu. I'm excited to see him this year. He's pretty good defensively, and I think he has the bat to be, bat in the 270s, hit 25 dingers and a good amount of doubles, and be a overall quality player for this team for years to come. So, but we'll wrap it up there. We went a little bit past what we usually try to do, but at the same time we always end up going past. But
That's how it works.
Pete, thanks for coming on. Like I mentioned, Pete is the host of the Foxborough Fellows podcast. Do you have anything else you want to plug? Anything else you want to say as we finish up here?
Yeah, I'll just quickly plug. I got an episode tomorrow. Bringing on a former NFL scout, and we're doing a Patriots 2024 mock draft live. So would love if anyone wants to tune in and just, kind of throw some comments our way. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, give me a follow on online, and happy to talk Pats, Red Sox, Boston sports just in general.
Sounds good. All right. Until next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week with another Raise the Banner podcast.